Hey, this is Dena. Welcome to the Den. I am not above eating my words when necessary. A few years ago, I made a very bold statement, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have to admit that I was wrong.
Seriously, is there any horror movie villain who is more of a badass than Freddy?
Yes, there is. I've been watching the Hellraiser movies, and Freddy, we've had some great times together, and you will always hold a special place in my heart, but my soul belongs to Pinhead now.
What?
In all seriousness, I really do think I have found a new horror icon, although I do reserve the right to change my mind again.
I am the way.
Pinhead has done the seemingly impossible and surpassed Freddy, at least in my mind. During the slasher film craze of the 80s, when they were mixing in a lot of camp with horror, a very dark little movie called Hellraiser came out of nowhere and made a very legitimate and, at least for its time, a very effective attempt at straight dark horror, undiluted with hardly any comedy or lightheartedness. Hellraiser is serious fucking business. The movie is centered on the Cotton family. The first we see is Frank, who recently acquired this puzzle box. Later on in the series, you're going to learn about where it came from and who made it, but for now, all we know is that it opens a gate to some kind of hell dimension. Guy with the hooks! The Hellraiser movies are mostly pretty tame in the graphic depictions of torture department, but I kinda have a problem with the hooks through the skin. That never fails to make me squirm. Even in the really early scenes like this, where it's clearly a sheet of latex, still gets to me. Speaking of which, here's a fun fact about me in regards to this movie. I originally discovered it around the time I was just getting into horror movies. I thought, hey, this Hellraiser movie is really popular, let's give it a shot. So I watched it with my mom, and after the scene with the hooks, then the pillars with the body parts hanging off, then the hand rummaging through the bloody bits of flesh and finally piecing together a face like a puzzle, we were totally disgusted, and we turned it off right about there. Needless to say, I am glad I watched it again a year or two later and gave it another chance. But back to the Cottons. Frank has a brother named Larry who has a wife, Julia. Their marriage is not so great. In fact, this movie actually does a great job of showing that in lots of subtle ways. Usually in just how there are so many awkward silences, moments of tension, and shit. Sometimes they just look at each other as if they're thinking, God, is this really what I'm stuck with? My favorite is this scene at a dinner party where Julia decides to turn in early and she lets both male guests kiss her on the cheek, but when she gets to Larry, she kind of goes, meh, and walks off. And Larry doesn't look surprised at all. There's also this scene.
You got any beer?
There's some in the fridge.
Oh, well. Why don't I get it? I got nothing better to do.
To Larry's credit, he wants to make it work, but Julia's really just along for the ride. I should point out that Larry is played by Andrew Robinson, who is probably best known for playing Garrick on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
How thoughtless of me not to consider the effects the destruction of my home world would have on your business. These must be trying times for you. Be brave.
What is it about horror movie actors ending up on Star Trek shows and vice versa? He also played a rather eccentric side character in Child's Play 3, which is another horror series I love.
A haircut ain't regulation, soldier. When's the last time you had a trim, huh?
This is it?
Speaking of Larry, he is a big dork.
The old homestead.
Make myself some coffee.
It's a great idea. There's the kitchen.
He is always trying to be clever and failing at it.
Does it still hurt?
What? Oh, only when I drink.
Personally, I kind of love him and I think he's adorable, but Julia doesn't seem to agree. As for Julia, she suffers from bored housewife syndrome. I think she was blissfully ignorant of her own feelings until Frank showed up on her doorstep about a week before the wedding, and one thing led to another. There's definitely a stark contrast between the adorable Larry and the ruggedly handsome hedonist Frank. Much as I hate to admit it with what a scumbag he is, Frank is pretty hot, so it's easy to see the attraction, especially from someone like Julia who feels stuck in a boring marriage. Anyway, sometime after Frank's little incident with the puzzle box, it was considerate of the cenobites to clean up after themselves, by the way, Larry and Julia move into that same house, which was owned by Larry and Frank's parents, having not seen Frank since the wedding. As Larry is trying to get a mattress upstairs, And of course, his character takes another hit as we see that he's really squeamish about blood.
Is it deep?
I don't know, I haven't looked. You know me and blood. I'm gonna faint.
You're not going to faint.
Shit.
He loses quite a lot of it on the floor of the room where Frank died, which is also a room where Julia is spending a lot of time these days. Larry is taken to the hospital and... one of the most awesome sequences I had ever seen in a horror movie takes place. This scene totally blew me away. When I first saw this, I was kind of dense about the fact that this was the same room where Frank died and the blood is causing him to rematerialize. I had no idea what this thing was. It wasn't until the brain was connected to the spinal cord that I realized that it was a human, and then I made the connection. But this is beautifully shot. Well, as beautiful as something like this could be. It's easy to figure out how it's done. All this stuff was probably sculpted in wax and they filmed it being melted and then played it backwards at high speed, but it's still really effective. So after the dinner party of sadness, Julia goes back up to the room and, this happens.
Julia?
Tell me who you are.
Frank.
Frank explains that the blood brought him back and that he needs more and he needs Julia to help him. Meanwhile, somehow I managed to get this far without mentioning that Larry has a daughter from a previous marriage, Kirsty. She doesn't like Julia very much. Anyway, Kirsty is leaving the dinner party of sadness with a guy named Steve who she's hitting it off with really well, and she discovers a vagrant watching her. Later that night, Kirsty has a weird-ass dream, which I'm sure symbolizes something, but I'm not sure what. This movie tends to allude to sex a lot, which I'll get more into later, but I just couldn't quite wrap my head around what this dream is supposed to mean other than maybe a really vague premonition.
I just wanted to make sure you were okay.
Especially since she feels the need to check on her dad afterwards. The next day, it begins. Julia starts actively finding victims for Frank. She takes a guy home and lures him upstairs, which is painfully weird and awkward for her. Plus she has to incapacitate him since Frank is too weak to do it. And the only available weapon is a hammer. Yeah, it's neither quick nor pretty. Julia isn't looking so good afterwards either. Frank, however, looks a little more developed. He's able to stand now and there's more meat on him.
Come here. Come to Daddy.
Ew, no thanks. Of course, Larry comes home and Julia has just enough time to ditch the body and hide in the bathroom. Actually, I love this line.
You want a cookie, little girl?
It's just kind of out of nowhere, and it's crazy how much it sounds like Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown.
Don't you want a balloon?
Which didn't come out until 3 years later.
I'm feeling sick.
Sick is definitely the word for you, Julia. Oh, and here's some fridge horror for you.
I'm hurting.
Yeah, he's excited about it because it means he's getting better, but he's walking around without skin, and he can feel that he's walking around without skin. Anyway, Frank needs more victims, and the cenobites are mentioned for the first time.
Here before they start to follow. The cenobites. It's only a matter of time before they find I've slipped them. Then we can be together the way we were before. We belong to each other now. For better, for worse. Like love. Only real.
Ew, Julia, don't, gross. I don't want to know what that tasted like. Nice jump scare movie. So apparently Kirsty works at a pet store where the creepy vagrant shows up again.
Give those back.
Crickets. They aren't even sour cream and onion flavored. Take that, Brad Jones.
Get out.
Careful.
Meanwhile, Julia claims a second victim for Frank. It's clearly getting easy for her, and we're watching Julia's gradual descent into madness.
I can taste that.
Frank is getting pretty close to being healed. At this point, he explains to Julia what happened to him.
This is it.
Let me
No,
see.
don't touch it. It's dangerous. It opens doors.
What kind of doors?
Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell. I didn't care which. I thought I'd gone to the limits. I hadn't. The cenobites gave me an experience beyond the limits. Pain and pleasure.
Fun fact, the actor who played Frank actually got dizzy while filming the scene where he was hung upside down and he threw up, which is why he looks so miserable. Naturally, they still used it since it was so effective. Hooks in the flesh. I feel the need to point out that this is 47 minutes into the movie and Pinhead still hasn't spoken. The worst part is that no matter how much he begged, they wouldn't stop that goddamn music box. So I think at this point Frank has already decided that he's going to kill Larry, but Julia isn't so far gone that she wants that to happen. Despite everything, she doesn't want Larry to die. So while Frank is trying to lure Larry upstairs, Julia is trying to keep him away from there. It turns out that Frank had left the room, but no one sees the rats nailed to the wall. Cue awkward love scene. Poor Larry, he's even bad in bed. Frank is looking like he's gonna kill Larry, but fortunately he backs off.
I don't understand you.
I cannot explain why Larry is so slow to react to Julia screaming her head off and his eventual reaction to it. In the book, yes, this movie is based on a book. Larry was really drunk. In the movie, he isn't, so I guess he's just really clueless on top of everything else, or he has a one-track mind. I don't know, it's weird.
Would you?
Uh-oh.
Anyway, the next day, Larry is telling Kirsty about Julia's weird behavior and asks her to talk to Julia.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Julia's bringing home victim number 3. Yeah, this will end well. I don't know how she doesn't see Kirsty there. I guess Kirsty is further away than it seems. She's still in a field, though. Whatever. So it's hammer time once again, and Kirsty ventures into the house and upstairs to see what's going on.
Kirsty, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank.
No.
You remember?
No.
You know, it's never specified or anything, but I get the distinct impression that there's a bad history between these two.
You've grown. You're beautiful.
Don't touch me.
Something about how the first words out of her mouth upon realizing who she's talking to is "don't touch me." Granted, he's all gross looking and she just saw him kill a guy, but I just get the feeling that there's more to it than that, especially considering some of the comments from Frank.
Daddy's so proud, don't you? Beautiful. No! Give me that.
No.
I love how she says that, like a little kid who just learned what that word means. No!
Give me the box!
Wouldn't fucking have it.
In case you didn't notice, Kirsty is fucking awesome. So Kirsty passes out, wakes up in a hospital, and this is where things start to get symbolic, which I'll get to in a minute.
What about this? Ringing the bells? You were hanging on to it like grim death.
I don't remember.
So Kirsty is left alone in the room with the box. And the way she plays with it is kind of suggestive. Also, there's a TV in the room that shows a flower opening up on a loop. A blossoming flower is commonly symbolic of a girl hitting puberty. It's It's always a bad sign when the box takes that shape. She explores the hallway she opened up. A screaming baby is heard like in her nightmare. I'm still not sure what that symbolizes. Babies are a result of sex, maybe? I don't know. Oops, and all of a sudden she's not alone.
Run, Kirsty! Run from the phallus monster!
Actually, I think his design is pretty cool, and it looks pretty good considering that this movie is fairly low budget. Also, it's referred to in the Hellraiser wiki as the Engineer. Now, in the book, the Engineer was a particular cenobite whose job it was to assign punishments. If that's what this thing does, she definitely needs to get the hell away. Uh-oh, that can't be good. A little over an hour into the movie and the cenobites are finally here. Let's see. Chatterer. Pinhead. Butterball. And female. Fun fact about female Cenobite. Her name in the credits was going to be Deep Throat, but I guess it wasn't allowed for some reason. Which is kind of silly considering some of the other material in this movie, but whatever. I am hereby calling her that from now on. She needs a descriptive name, just like the others, and not just be identified by her gender. Girl power and all that. Pinhead finally gets some dialogue.
The box. You opened it. We came.
And I love how simple and straightforward he is.
It is a means to summon us.
Who are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
He's not evil, he's not especially enjoying this, he just has a job to do.
It was a mistake!
You solved the box. We came. Now you must come with us. Taste our pleasures.
Just for fun, I'm going to do a running tally of how many times Pinhead says the words suffer and flesh in this series.
Go away, leave me alone!
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Wait, please wait!
No time for argument.
You've done this before, right?
Many, many times.
To a man called Frank Cotton.
Oh, yes.
He escaped you.
Nobody escapes us.
He did. I've seen him.
Impossible.
Kirsty makes a deal with the Cenobites.
Supposing he had escaped us, what has that to do with you?
I can lead you to him, and you can take him back instead of me.
I love that, by the way. Can you imagine if Nancy had said to Freddy, hey, take my drunk-ass mother instead of me, since she's the one who actually had a hand in killing you, and Freddy went,
okay, bitch.
Like I said, Kirsty is awesome.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe. But if you cheat us, we'll tear your soul apart.
This is only the beginning of how she will do whatever it takes to survive, and anyone who has to be sacrificed in the process is SOL. I mean, not so much here because Frank is clearly a scumbag and definitely deserves hell more than Kirsty, but, well, I will eventually get to my point in a later video. I just wanted to send up a flag here signifying that this is where it starts. Meanwhile, Larry comes home and Julia says she needs to show him something.
What is it?
That can't be good. I am ending part 1 here because the shit is about to really hit the fan. So if you haven't seen Hellraiser yet, here's your chance to check it out before the major spoilers happen. See you in part 2.